other upcoming stuff. Actually, there isn't a whole lot of upcoming programs that we have. Everything we do have, you can see on our website at thegdl.org. And if you go to the gdl.org/events, there is our event calendar. We have trivia next Thursday. That's our big virtual event, so you can see that there. And if you want to see a list of everything we'll talk about today, you can do that at thegdl.org/what are you reading. We'll have all the list of everything we talked about there today. I am Ryan, Digital Services Librarian. I was going to make a joke, and I'll also make it. I'll say I'm the man who will only die once. That's what I thought of while looking at some of the book titles that we'll talk about today. And with that, we'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to the librarians here on this side. We'll just go down from top to bottom and talk about our recommendations. Sherry, would you like to talk first?
Sure. The first one I want to talk about is the third one in a trilogy. It's The God of Lost Words by A.J. Hackwith. I think I talked about the first one in this trilogy, like way back when we started. So the third one, usually I'm disappointed by the third book in a trilogy. That was not the case with this one. It was actually my favorite one. If you're someone who doesn't like to read a trilogy or a series until they're all done, you can pick this one up now. So the basic premise is there are wings of a library that are spread out among the places of the afterworld, including the unwritten wing, which is in hell. There's also an unsung wing, I believe, that's in Valhalla. There's a lot of them. So in this book, Claire and Brevity, who are the librarians, and then Hero, who is an unwritten character, and Raimi, who is an angel. So we've got a lot of characters. They need to figure out how to save the unwritten wing. Malphus, who's the general of Hell's army, suspects the library holds immense power and wants to take it over. So Claire and her friends must bring all the library wings together, and they might even need to join forces with a past enemy to make sure that the library stays intact. This was the perfect ending to the trilogy. I thought it was a great love letter to books and libraries. It had several nods to mythology that I really enjoyed. I'll miss this world, but I can always reread the series and probably will again.
What was the name of the first book?
Library of the Unwritten.
Okay, awesome. Does it draw like a lot on mythology, or is it all sort of original?
It draws on a lot of mythology. You get some Greek mythology in there. You get Valhalla. You get a few other mythical type of worlds. There's even a couple scenes in heaven. Just so good. Such a good world building.
All right. Excellent, Sherry. Chris, let's have you up next. What would you like to talk about first?
Hi, everybody. Sure. I'd like to talk about The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Heller. It is the story of 50-year-old Elle, and it is told in movements in time that can be somewhat jarring to the reader. The idea of place as a character is predominant in this book. It is a Reese Witherspoon book club choice, and it was released in July of this year. I thought that it came out of the gates hard and fast, like a Kentucky Derby thoroughbred. As the story races on, though, it loses a little steam, and it didn't pull out the win quite the way I thought, or hoped it would. I think it's an excellent book club choice, as there are many, many hard-hitting subjects, like domestic abuse, adultery. It also has moments of what I call beautiful, eloquent execution, as the author is able to capture emotional sentiments that are representative of youthful nostalgia. I know that's a lot to think about, but there were just moments when I was reading this book that just totally captured my age and the story at the same time. I don't know how to explain it other than like that. So I think people would really enjoy this book for some of those reasons.
I think it's interesting that you talked about how it wasn't maybe everything you hoped it would be. What is something that you look for in a book or any kind of story, that something you enjoyed or you liked even if you didn't like it that much? Or like you mentioned, like a great book club book, right? Which I think is interesting. So there are interesting ideas there, even if it wasn't everything you hoped it would be.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times with my book club that meets here in Fenton, a lot of people be like, I didn't like the book, but after talking with my book club, I changed my mind. I like the book. So when I'm thinking about this particular book, I'm not always a huge fan of Place as a character. But in this book, in the way that she uses that description of place, I really think that added to the story and also helped. If anybody's ever had a place where they vacationed as a child with fond memories, this book nails that.
I think that's really interesting. Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Yes.
All right, Kristen, we will bring you up next.
Hi, everyone. So the first book I would like to talk about is The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. So this one came out in October, and I don't know if you're like me, you like to read kind of a spooky read in October, and if you do, this is definitely one that I would recommend. So this one starts off with Jane. She is a straightforward, pretty practical person, and she decides that the best thing for her to do is to find a husband. And note, please, this takes place in like an alternative post-war England. So kind of like they call it a mirror version of post-war England. So you're thinking like maybe early 1900s, that era. So she is living, she's kind of like, she was an orphan, so she became a foster child of a couple, and she decides like, as she's older now, her best bet would be to find a husband. But she's like, this is practical. This isn't like a romantic thing. She just wants to find a husband so she can stay in the area. So she decides that she wants to become the wife of the reclusive Dr. Augustine Lawrence, who agrees to her proposal. But there's one condition. She cannot visit Lindridge Hall, which is his like family manor. And what happens is that on their wedding night, they go to the hall to have dinner, but she ends up being stuck there because of this terrible storm, and the road gets washed out. So when she comes to because she was on her way back to the town, but when she comes back, the road's washed out. So the road's washed out. She comes back to the hall and she finds him terrified, paranoid. Like, it's not the same man that she basically married. And she, in the morning, like, he's pretty much himself again. But Jane kind of knows like something's really wrong with him, with the house. And so it's kind of like a gothic horror story. The description I've read of it kind of compares it to Crimson Peak, the movie. I've never seen the movie, but I know a lot of people really like it. So it's kind of like that gothic horror type novel. They compare it to Shirley Jackson books like Haunting of Hill House. They also compare it to Rebecca. I have read Haunting of Hill House, and there's definitely some similar themes. I have not read Rebecca, so I cannot say. I liked this book. I thought that it probably went on a little too long. There were definitely some really creepy things going on in there. And I think that it had a lot of potential, but I think if it was maybe like 50 to 75 pages shorter, it probably would have held my interest a little bit more. But I don't know, towards the end of it, I was like, is this done yet? So, but I do think like if you like the gothic horror genre, I think that it is a good pick. But just beware, like it does kind of go on a little bit too long, in my opinion.
That's been my big complaint about a lot of things, books and movies and TV shows lately, that sometimes they just need to be a little shorter. I think they need to get to the point. They have something really good and they kind of drag it on a little too long.
Yeah. There's a lot of, because there's like, what happens makes sense, but there's just like so much like build up to it. And then there's like, when it happens, you're just kind of like, but that's it? Like, what? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I totally kind of like, I get it. It's just, but at the same time, it's just like, I wanted it to be shorter.
Sometimes having, less is more. If you have a more concise kind of story.
Yeah,
I can
definitely.
understand that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Kristen. All right. Nancy, you are up next. What do you want to talk about first?
Hello, everyone. I ran across this book at my desk, and it is The Pull of the Stars by Emily Donahue. It's a pandemic novel, but it's the 1918 Spanish flu. And I guess she was writing it, and she had to hurry up and finish it so they could put it out in 2020. And there are so many similarities between the coronavirus and the Spanish flu and the way the public reacted to it and the measures that they took, including masking and signs, do your patriotic duty and stay away from people and wear your masks and whatnot. But the main character is a nurse midwife at the hospital. I think it's London. And circumstances couldn't be worse in this hospital. It's in Dublin. It's set in Dublin. And she's at the hospital, and every day, it just seems like every day it gets worse at the hospital. They're rationing everything, food and supplies and doctors and nurses. They have an abundance of patients who are dying in the hospital. Very few of them are living and living through this Spanish flu. And they're also going through the internal skirmish in Ireland and also World War I. So there's a lot going on. The period of time is very grim, and it's kind of all about how this nurse copes. And someone who read the book here at the library, I asked her, does this book ever get any better? And she said no. So, but I still maintain it's a very well-written book, and it's a good story. I was reading this at the same time I was reading another grim book, and it was a little bit much. I had to switch over to a fantasy book when I was done, but this is a very good book. It's worth reading.
And I think that's, the tagline of this virtual show is that sometimes the best books aren't the happiest books. Like, it seems to be the thread of what we all enjoy reading.
It's very relevant, yes, and it's not a happy book. Yep.
All right, thanks, Nancy. All right, Sherry, we'll bring you back up. What would you like to talk about next?
The next one I want to talk about is The Fastest Way to Fall by Denise Williams. It's romance. And this is a new must-read romance author for me. I loved her previous book, which was How to Fail at Flirting, and this book I think was even better. So Britta's tasked with reviewing a fitness app for an online magazine. She doesn't want to lose weight. That's not the point of what she's reviewing. She just wants to be healthy and feel good about herself. And this app is supposed to promote that. Wes is actually the owner of the app. He doesn't take on coaching clients anymore, but he's having a rough time in his personal life. And so he decides to take on a coaching client, which turns out to be Britta. So neither one knows what the other one is doing. She doesn't know he's the owner. He doesn't know she's reviewing his app. They become friends. And then it turns into something more, but they both have secrets, and not just the professional ones. They have secrets in their personal lives as well. So this is slow burn. friends to lovers is the trope. It was just so well written and a lot of body positivity. There's a lot of diversity among the characters in the book. This is like what the new romance novel is all about. And I will read anything else she writes after this. It was just that good.
I think that's a really great recommendation then. I think if you find an author like that who you're just really, really into, that makes a really strong recommendation. Thanks, Sherry. All right. Chris, what would you like to talk about next?
I'm going to talk about The Man Who Died Twice. It is that's the play on Ryan's joke.
There's the callback.
Right. It's book 2 of the Thursday Murder Club, which I think I talked about in June. It's by Richard Osman. So in book 2, we learn more about Elizabeth, who is the head sleuth of the Thursday Murder Club. And in this particular version of a mystery, her ex-husband shows up and presents a new mystery for these retired friends. So I thought this sophomore effort by Richard was not as good as the first. And I think it's because in the second book, he spends less time talking about the club. And the beauty of the club is that these characters are really lovable. So I found this mystery to have a lot of moving parts that I had to keep track of. In the end, it was all wrapped up nice and neatly. But I was, like I said, I was a little disappointed that we didn't spend as much time with our characters. Like one of the characters is, I can't think of his name, but he gets hurt in the very beginning of the story, and then we don't really get to spend a lot of time with him because he doesn't get to go on the mystery tour, if you will, because he's at home sick. But they did introduce a new character, and it was one of the main club members' grandson, Kendrick, and his role in the book really added a lightheartedness and humor to the story that I appreciated.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Chris. And I think that gives us Kristen next.
Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is Crow Bones by Anne Bishop. So if you ever have one of those books that is like an auto buy or one of those series that's like you automatically know like the next book, no matter what, no matter how much you've heard negative about it or like positive or whatever, you like know you're gonna like automatically read it. This is that series for me. So this is book number 8 in the Other series. This book actually doesn't come out till March, but I got an advanced copy of it. The Other series starts off with Written in Red. That's book 1, and it started in 2013. And this is like a spin-off of the series. So there was 5 books in the first series, and then this is book 8. So like the last 3 books of the series have been, it's called The World of the Others, which the first 5 are just the others. So the first 5 revolve around like one character specifically. These last 3 revolve around like a multiple characters. I will say these books, then each chapter has different characters. So if you're not a fan of multiple narrators, I would definitely steer you away from these books. However, if you like fantasy, sci-fi, definitely recommend this series for you. Basically, the others are like paranormal beings. We have shapeshifters, vampires, even deadlier ones, which at this point we really still don't really know a lot about them, except for that they're there's like elementals and like all this kind of stuff. I mean, we're really talking about like fantasy kind of stuff here, but it's really fun. So in this book, we have Vicky, who is a human, and she has a resort that she owns, and she was also a character in the first book of The World of the Others, which is Lake Silence. And this book kind of revolves around her and her friends, and they have guests over for Trickster Night, which is also considered to be Halloween, basically. And they have people coming over for trick-or-treating, and then everything's going great between the humans and the others. And one thing that is worth mentioning is in the previous 5 books, there was a big like kind of war between the others and the humans, and so there's a lot of backstory to this book and to this book series. So someone arrives dressed as Crowbones. Everybody's scared, and then there's a lot of deaths going on. Everybody fears that the real Crowbones may have come to the Jumble. The Jumble is the resort. And then to encourage humans to help them find some answers, the elders, the elementals, they close all the roads. Everybody's stuck in their town, and now Vicky, the human police chief, Grimshaw, and the vampire lawyer must find out who is kind of trying to pit humans against the others. Again, this book series is like one of my favorite. It's like definitely on auto read. I don't really have a lot of time to read a lot of like advanced copies anymore because there's just so many books that I want to read. But this one, like as soon as I saw it was available, snapped it right up. So I definitely recommend this series. Again, if you like sci-fi, if you like fantasy, and are okay with being able to keep up with multiple narratives, because again, it does go back and forth very quickly. There are a lot of chapters, they're short chapters, but you do have to try to keep up with that. So if you're cool with that, you will very much enjoy it. Really recommend going back to book 1 though and getting in at the very beginning.
Yeah, it seems like that might be necessary.
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
But that's a great thing. If you recommend a series, then it's a lot of books someone gets to read. Then if you get into it,
yeah, it'll keep you busy for a while.
All right, Nancy, let's talk about your last recommendation here.
Okay. First, I wanted to say, Chris, I will definitely recommend the second book of the Thursday Murder Club. I did not read it, but the first one, everyone I recommended it to loved it. So I will keep recommending that. And also, Kristen, I'm excited. I'm going to start that series because that's right up my alley. Gives me a break from the historical novels, the things, about war and all of that. I like my fantasy. The last book I'm going to recommend, our book club read this for this month, and it's called The Beekeeper of Aleppo, and it too came out in June of 2020. And you would think, oh, a pleasant little story, let's read about beekeepers, but not so much. I was reading this one at the same time as I was reading The Pull of the Stars, and they were both very disquieting. They parallel real world situations. And this one is a book about the Syrian refugees and the Syrian war. And I didn't know anything about it. So as I was reading this book, I was Googling and I was looking up some current events. And I looked up images of Syria as it stands today. And, just a little bit of history about this war. But the way it starts out, these 2 beekeepers are middle-aged men, and they produce tons of honey, and this is an established business that they've had, and they plan on passing off to their children. Nuri is the beekeeper, and Afra is his wife, and they have a son. And it's in the city of Aleppo. And then war overtakes their land, and it's a story of how they become refugees and their travels to Europe. They end up in London and they start their life over. But I mean, can you really truly start over? And I just kept thinking over and over again of myself, just with barely the shoes on my feet and a little backpack. Would I be able to just leave my home and start walking? And life would truly have to be that bad for you to do that. So it's a really good story, though. It's just like The Pull of the Stars. It's a heartbreaking story, and it's based on facts and history, but it's a must read because really we have to get out of our comfort zone. I've heard people say this is the worst period in history. No, it's really not. If you are well read and you read a lot of history, it's nowhere near the worst time of history. So kind of gives you a little perspective on that and a little bit of sympathy for the refugee crisis and what's going on right now with that. So overall, I don't think our book club liked the book, but it was just a difficult read. It hit a little close to home.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. All right. So to wrap everything up here, would you like to talk about a spindle splintered? Would anybody want to get us started talking about that?
Sure.
No? Sure.
I will. Yeah. So I don't remember who recommended this. Was this Sherry or Kristen? Sherry. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's an alternate telling set in dual time periods of Sleeping Beauty. Zinnia is the, I guess, the modern time main character, and her narrative is snappy, and I really loved her. She gives, I also liked the kind of loose literary evaluation of fairy tales that were peppered in throughout the whole story, and the idea of time travel. I think a lot of readers will be they'll find it appealing that there's the whole dying girl thing in this story. And then, so I was also pleased to know that there's going to be more.
Any other thoughts anyone would want to share?
I really liked it too. Oh, sorry.
Multiverse.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Kristen?
Oh, I was just gonna say the same thing. Like, I like that it was a multiverse, like how it compared itself to like a Spider-Verse. And I was reading through like comments on like Goodreads and how a lot of people are like, I didn't like the pop culture references, but I love the pop culture references. I don't know. I feel like that would be part of the point of the book, is because like Zinnia is a 21-year-old and she lives in modern times. So why wouldn't she use pop culture references? I don't know. But I don't know. I thought it was really cool. And yeah, I'm excited for the next one. The next one's going to be about Snow White and the evil queen of Snow White. So I don't know. It sounds pretty cool. And I think it's going to be like the Wayward Children books, where they're just going to be like a lot of novellas. And I don't know. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I think that was also appealing to me, is the fact that it was a little bit shorter and I didn't have to get too invested in it, yet it presented a really great story. So
yeah, I agree.
And I think Kristen was right. It is kind of like the School of Wayward Children. It reminded me a lot of those.
And I did not read it yet, but it's sitting on my desk. I finally got it in as a hold.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in here. Any parting words that anybody want to leave with our listeners? We have some other cool programs coming up. Trivia again next Thursday. I'm excited for that. Next Thursday, next week. This Thursday, we have Quick Bread with Mary Spencer. We'll be learning how to make quick bread for Thanksgiving. That'll also be on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, so you can join me there. I'm looking forward to that. And again, you can find all the books we talked about today listed on our website at thegdl.org/whatareyourreading. And if you have any thoughts on them or questions, go ahead and leave them in a comment here. But thank you for watching, and we'll be back next month.
See you later.
bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.